Stop for a moment, because the distance you have been feeling is not what you think it is. Someone is staying away from you, and every time you wonder why, you are only seeing the surface of something much deeper. You may think the silence means they stopped caring, that their feelings changed, or that another person has taken your place, but there is a secret behind this distance that has been difficult for them to carry, and the first letter of that secret is the only thing they have been brave enough to reveal. See, you have probably noticed the change. The replies became shorter, the conversations became less frequent, the warmth that once seemed natural suddenly became guarded. There were moments when you could feel them wanting to come closer, and then, almost without warning, they pulled themselves back again. You may have asked yourself what you did wrong. You may have replayed old conversations, searching for one sentence that might have changed everything. You may have wondered whether you said too much, cared too much, trusted too much, or simply became too important to someone who was not ready for what they felt. But what if the reason they are staying away has almost nothing to do with you? What if every step backward has actually been an attempt to protect something they are terrified of losing? What if the silence you interpreted as rejection has secretly been filled with thoughts about you that they have never dared to speak? There is something they have been fighting inside themselves, and the strange part is that you have probably sensed it. You may have felt their presence even when they were absent. You may have thought about them unexpectedly. You may have remembered their voice while doing something completely unrelated. You may have looked at your phone without knowing why, almost expecting their name to appear. And sometimes, just when you decide you are finally going to stop thinking about them, something small reminds you of them again. A familiar song, a place, a phrase, a photograph, a name, a certain time of day, a memory that arrives without permission. It may feel like your heart is trying to tell you something, but you cannot yet understand what it is trying to say, because there is a story unfolding underneath the silence. They have been staying away because something has changed inside them, not because they feel nothing, because they feel too much. That may sound impossible. You may think that if someone truly cared, they would come closer instead of disappearing. They would speak instead of remaining silent. They would explain instead of leaving you wondering, and you would be right to want that. But people do not always run from what they dislike. Sometimes they run from what they cannot control. Sometimes love exposes fears that a person has spent years hiding. Sometimes caring deeply makes someone realize how vulnerable they have become. And sometimes the person who appears the coldest is secretly the person struggling the hardest. There was a moment when they realized you mattered more than they expected. It may have happened during an ordinary conversation. You may not even remember it. Perhaps you said something simple. Perhaps you looked at them in a certain way. Perhaps you showed kindness when you had no reason to. Perhaps you remembered something about them that everyone else had forgotten, or perhaps you simply made them feel understood. Whatever happened, something inside them shifted. They went home carrying your presence in their thoughts. They tried to dismiss it. They told themselves it meant nothing. They tried to return to normal, but something had already changed. You had reached a place inside them that they had carefully protected for a long time. And once someone reaches that place, distance does not always erase them. sometimes distance makes their presence louder. That is why they have been struggling. They can avoid your messages. They can avoid your calls. They can avoid places where they might see you. They can convince themselves that staying away is the responsible thing to do, but they cannot command their own memories to disappear, and they cannot control the questions that appear when the night becomes quiet. Why do I miss you? Why do I still think about you? Why does your absence hurt? Why do I feel relieved when I hear that you are doing well? Why do I become nervous when I imagine seeing you again? And why, after all this time, does your name still have the power to change the entire atmosphere inside me? Those questions have been haunting them. But there is another question they are afraid to ask themselves. What if staying away from you is actually making everything stronger? That is where the meaning of the sea begins to matter. They have not told you the whole reason. They have given you pieces, a little distance here, a strange excuse there, a delayed response, a sudden change in behavior, a sentence that seemed incomplete. They may have said they were busy, they may have said they needed space, they may have acted as though they were protecting their peace, but beneath those explanations was another word they could not say, a word beginning with C, and that word has been controlling more of their decisions than you realize. Maybe it is confusion, maybe it is commitment, maybe it is circumstance, maybe it is fear of consequences. Maybe it is a conflict they have never told you about, or maybe it is something far more personal, something they are ashamed to admit, something that makes them question whether they deserve to be close to you at all. You have been trying to solve their behavior from the outside. But the real answer is happening inside them. They are fighting a battle you cannot see, and because you cannot see it, you have been filling the empty spaces with your own fears. You have wondered whether you are not enough. You have wondered whether someone else is better. You have wondered whether they found another person. You have wondered whether they simply stopped caring. But every one of those questions has been built on something you do not actually know. You do not know what they think about when nobody is watching. You do not know what they feel when they see your name. You do not know how many times they have almost reached out. You do not know how many messages they have written and erased. You do not know how many times they have told themselves, "Stay away," while another part of them was quietly saying, "Go back." And that internal battle is becoming harder for them to hide. There was a night when they almost contacted you. They had their phone in their hand. Your name was right there. They stared at it longer than they want you to know. Their heart was telling them to call. Their mind was telling them not to. They imagined what you might say. They imagined hearing your voice. They imagined the relief of finally explaining everything, and then fear returned. They put the phone down. They told themselves that tomorrow would be easier, but tomorrow came. And the feeling did not disappear. Instead, something unexpected happened. They heard something about you. Someone mentioned your name. Maybe they heard that you were changing. Maybe they learned that you were moving forward. Maybe they discovered that you were no longer waiting for them in the way you once did. And instead of feeling relieved, they felt something they were not prepared for. They felt the possibility of losing you. That possibility frightened them more than the distance ever had. because staying away had always been easier when they believed you would still be there. But now they are beginning to understand that your heart has limits. You can love someone and still become tired. You can hope and still choose yourself. You can care and still walk away from uncertainty. You can forgive and still refuse to live in confusion. And perhaps that is the transformation they never expected to witness in you. You are becoming less desperate for answers. You are becoming more peaceful in uncertainty. You are learning to stop chasing people who make you question your worth. You are learning that someone's inability to communicate does not define your value, and you are beginning to understand that sometimes silence is not a punishment. Sometimes silence reveals who is willing to cross the distance. That realization is changing everything, because the person who stayed away from you may have believed that you would always remain emotionally available. They may have believed that whenever they returned, you would simply open the door. But now they sense something different. You are not the same person they left behind. You have grown. You have awakened. You have learned to protect your peace. And this new version of you is creating a fear inside them that they cannot ignore. What if you no longer need them? What if the distance they created becomes permanent? What if the person they thought would always wait finally stops waiting? What if the opportunity they were afraid to take becomes the opportunity they regret losing? These questions are beginning to follow them everywhere, and now the strange signs have started. You may notice their name appearing unexpectedly. You may hear something connected to them from someone else. You may dream about a conversation that never happened. You may suddenly feel emotionally pulled toward a memory you thought you had already released. You may encounter a place, object, song, or phrase that seems strangely connected to them. Do not assume every coincidence is a prophecy. But do not ignore what your heart is learning either. Sometimes life brings reminders not to tell you exactly what will happen, but to show you what still needs healing.